Hey, everybody. I just want to thank you so much for joining me tonight, or whatever time it is where you are, for this special presentation. I am Lainey Clymer. Some of you might know me as Lainey Clymer, but my real name, I'm Amy. I'm a senior technical recruiter here at OffSec. I've been a technical recruiter for many years, but have been with OffSec for just over a year. And I really love it. And because of your interest on Discord, this is actually the second presentation that I've been invited to give to you on career advice. And again, I just want to say that I'm so humbled and honored to be here to present to you again today. But, or if you missed it, the first presentation on resume tips and tricks, if you're interested in viewing that, you can check it out on our official OffSec YouTube channel. But as much as we all love writing resumes, we're not here to talk about that today. So instead, I am here to do a walkthrough of how I hack an interview. Okay, so all of the information that I share with you today is going to be based on my own personal experience as an interviewee, my experience as someone who interviews people, and also the insights from many years of being a technical recruiter, a hiring manager, and then some behind the scene insights as someone who's worked very closely with hiring teams and managers of all kinds. And my goal, or goals, to share some universal insights about interviewing that should help you feel better prepared and more comfortable. Try to help boost your confidence. That's whether you're just starting your career or are a seasoned professional. I'd like to offer a little something that can help you to feel inspired and understand where your passion lives. And I'm going to do my best to have a somewhat interactive conversation with you during this presentation. And I'll ask a couple of questions. If you want to answer in the chat box, feel free to play along. But I also will leave time at the end of the presentation for your questions. So if you could just wait to ask them until then, it'll help me better see your questions and moderate the chat. And if I'm not able to answer your specific questions today, I have added a couple different ways that you can reach out to me. So you can find me at Lainey Clymer in the OffSec Discord channel, or if you go on LinkedIn, you can just type in Amy K, Senior Technical Recruiter at OffSec, and you'll find my profile. Okay, interview anxiety. We all experience this, even if we're the most qualified candidate in the bunch. One of the top 10 stressors for adults is losing your job and having to find a new one. And following that is changing jobs or starting a new job. So you're not alone. It is normal to feel this way. And there's lots of reasons why. It can be intimidating, knowing that you're meeting one or more than one person for the first time, and that this is your opportunity to sell yourself. You'll be speaking to people who might be in some kind of authority role, and that can be a little bit intimidating or scary. And this might also be what you think is your dream opportunity or company to work for, and that's intimidating too. And if you're doing a technical interview, so aside from assessing technical aptitude, you may start to wonder, what else is the interviewer looking for from me? Or what will they be judging you on? So for many companies and teams, this is going to look very different. Will it be your appearance? So if you're doing a video or in-person interview, they may be judging that. Will it be your general attitude? We're going to discuss that a little later. Will they be assessing your professionalism or how likable you are? or whether you can hold a conversation with them. And there are a few things that you can do to lessen this anxiety, but before we get into that, first, just know that this is the first time that this person or group of people will be meeting you too, and that they want to make just as good of an impression on you as you want to make on them. And if you come prepared with proper talking points in advance, you're going to improve your interview and conversational skills. But we're going to move ahead and discuss ways to reduce your anxiety rather than talk about how normal it is or all of the reasons that cause it. Okay, so we're about to get a little personal here. It's funny how life has a way of sometimes just sort of smacking you in the face when you need to wake up. After graduating from college, no matter what position I held, my goal was always the same: to get promoted and work my way up the corporate ladder. Does that sound familiar? I mean, that's what I'm supposed to do, right? So I found myself working for a company for over 10 years. Most of that time was spent as a manager, and I thought I liked it at first. But eventually I realized I was no longer happy. I felt isolated, bored. I had a supervisor who, let's just say, was not the best. I really hated getting up in the morning to go to work. I felt trapped, but I also felt a deep sense of loyalty to this company. Have any of you ever felt like this? And if so, just feel free to give me a quick yes or no in the chat. And I'm trying to see the chat, so I apologize. There we go. Okay. But anyway, so eventually I was so worn down by what was going on that I decided to start applying for positions with other companies. And I had many interviews for many different positions that I was qualified or sometimes even overqualified for. And yet after the interview process, I never was offered a job. And I could not figure out why. But I did know this: I needed to make a change and I needed to do something for myself. So I ended up quitting with a couple of months' notice. I cashed in my pension plan, sold almost everything that I owned, and packed my life into a minivan to move across the country. And that moment for me was a pivotal moment in my life. That choice that I made, and many believed to be crazy, some even considered it to be some sort of crisis, but it wasn't. That choice helped me to find myself again and to figure out what was really important to me. And that's the moment that allowed me to dig deep inside of myself and ask the questions that matter. I realized that I would never want to work for any company or position that left me feeling lifeless and uninspired each day. So why would you? And fun fact, ever since changing my mindset about interviews, I have never interviewed with any company and not made an offer. So hopefully, I mean, I didn't always choose to accept, but hopefully this will help you too. Okay, so change your mindset. I have this idealistic dream that everyone has the ability to find a position they love. I feel that as a technical recruiter, that's my number one responsibility. I want to match qualified people with a company or position that they really love. On our Discord channel, both in general conversations and during office hours, we are asked quite often how to prepare for an interview. What should you expect? What are these interviews like? What questions are you going to be asked? Now, much like the resume writing presentation, I'm going to tell you like it is and say that there is no one size fits all to these questions. The one message, though, that has been echoed repeatedly is to change your mindset about interviews. So what a large task for me to try to explain. Now, this is where I start to get a little nervous. How can I help you to better understand what it means to change your mindset while interviewing? So when I first started jotting down notes about how I was going to approach this entire discussion with you, I started to write down a list of questions that I wanted to share with you. And these were for you to answer on your own, meant for you to think about and just try to come up with some answers before your interviews. But as I was writing down all of these what questions, I realized what I was really trying to do is get you to find your why. When I was hired for my first position as a technical recruiter, my CEO assigned a book for me to read, written by Simon Sinek, called Start with Why. And if you're not familiar with who he is a renowned author of 5 books, an inspirational keynote speaker, a regular podcast and TED Talk presenter, and also an owner of his own company, which is based on his newfound why. And if you're interested in hearing Simon's story about his origin,
One moment.
Of the Start with Why, for the sake of time, I'm just going to share the link with you, and you can feel free to watch that. Now, here is one that a short video that I am going to have, or that I'm going to share with you, excuse me, to help you figure out or start to think about what your why is.
Find a friend you love, and one of those people who, if you called them at 3 o'clock in the morning, they'd take your call and you would take theirs. Don't do this with a spouse. Don't do this with a sibling. Don't do this with a boyfriend or girlfriend. Those relationships are too close. But find a best friend and ask them this simple question: why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy, because it's very hard for the human brain to put our feelings into words, because the part of the brain that controls our feelings doesn't control language. This is why we use metaphors and analogies, and why we struggle to tell people how we actually feel. It's because it's a different part of the brain. And so they're going to look at you and be like, I don't know. Why are you asking me this? And you say, come on, I know you've been there for me my whole life. And then you actually stop asking the question why, ironically. You actually ask the question what. You say, come on, what specifically is it about me that I know you'd be there for me no matter what? And they're going to hem and haw because it's hard to put into words. Don't help them. Don't let anybody else help them. And they're going to start describing you. I don't know. You're funny. You're smart. You're honest. You've always been there for me. You go, good. You play devil's advocate. Good. That's the definition of a friend. What specifically is about me that I'd know you'd be there for me no matter what? And again, they'll hem and haw, and some will get through this quickly, and some will get through it slowly, and it'll be a struggle, and you have to continue to play devil's advocate. Good, that's the definition of a close friend. What specifically is it about me? And eventually, they'll give up. Eventually, they'll stop describing you, and they'll start describing themselves. Like my friend said to me, Simon, I don't know. All I know is that I can sit in a room with you. I don't even have to talk to you, and I feel inspired, and I got goosebumps. In fact, I'm getting them right now. They will put into words the value you have in their life, and you will have the emotional reaction. You'll either well up with tears or you will get goosebumps. This puts you in the ballpark. This is where your why lives. And if you do this with multiple friends, they will say the same kind of thing. In fact, sometimes they'll say the same exact thing, because your why is the thing you give to the world, and amongst your closest and best friends, it is the space you fill in their lives. So that's a fun little way you can find your why. The simple answer is no. A why is the sum total of who you are. It is the sum total of the experiences you had when you were a kid, the way you were raised, what you got from your parents, your family, your friends, that made you who you are. You can change the way you navigate the world, you can change what you do, but you can't change who you are. Our lives offer us opportunity to live in balance with who we are or not. Like if we start doing things that are counter to who we are, our friends say to us, it's like, I don't know who you are anymore, right? And that is what your why is. Your why is the fundamental core of what inspires you. It is the spark that drives you. And our whys are fully formed probably by our mid to late teens. The youngest why discovery I've ever done was a 16-year-old. And that's it. So no, a why does not change. If anything, crisis reveals it to us, but it doesn't change it. I don't care what someone's motivation is. My only rule is they have to want it, that it should never be thrust upon them. So I will never coerce, push, convince, or pressure someone to learn their why. They have to decide they want it. It's like the old joke, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to really want to change. Um, it's the same thing. Like, I will help my friends. Like, my friends all know that if they ask me to help them find their why, the answer will always be yes, but they have to ask. They have to ask. It's the same thing. So I want someone ideally and philosophically to do it, for inspirational reasons. But if they're going through a hard period or a dark period, or there's fear, then if this is a tool that helps, then maybe I don't care what the motivation is. Maybe I don't care if it's for inspirational reasons, or maybe I could argue that it's all inspirational. If you're trying to come out of darkness to find light, that's pretty damn inspiring.
Okay, so I have a few reasons why I wanted to show this video to you and the point that he's trying to make. Everyone who interviews with you is going to want to hear, why do you want this job or to work for their company? And everyone wants this answer to be honest and genuine for you. We're all also looking for someone who can express what they're passionate about appropriately, meaning with excitement in your voice and not like this is just some interview that means nothing to you. There are always going to be the big questions that everyone tells you to be prepared for. Why do you want this job? What makes you happiest at work? What is it about this company that appeals to you? And tell me your story. And only give me the quick and relevant parts to the job, because if you go into more detail, that can be okay, but let the interview lead you with that. Um, but moving forward. So be prepared. It's a little odd that I ask you to be prepared when I'm doing a presentation on how to prepare for an interview. But so I'm just going to offer a few basics that I'd like to cover with my experience here. Some of the worst interviews that I've ever been through are with people who have no idea who I am, what company I'm calling from, what position they're interviewing for. Some people don't even take the time to read the job descriptions. A lot of people rely on AI or keyword searches to find any open position and apply for that job. We mentioned that last time in the resume writing, which is called the spray and pray method for applying. Now, there are many ways to prepare for a job, and we're going to expand on all of these later or throughout this presentation. But one, do your homework. Two, keep track of your interview progress. So what company did you apply to? Did they call you back? Schedule an interview. Who will be interviewing you? What kind of interview is it? And if you don't know the answer to any of these questions that I mentioned earlier, it's your best resource to keep in contact with the HR professional, recruiter, or hiring manager that you first connected with. And at the end of the day, just be yourself. Be authentic. That's all we're looking for is, and that's what's going to make you stand out from the crowd, especially if you approach the interview with honesty and passion that you're communicating to the interviewer rather. Okay, I have another video. This is just a little bit of advice based on that last thing that I mentioned there about being yourself and authentic. So being able to demonstrate that you're passionate about what you do, this level of authenticity and vulnerability can be scary for some, in fact, most people. So please forgive me that I'm showing you two videos in a row, and I am going to try to skip ahead so that you don't have to watch the whole thing. But this is again Simon Sinek and 5 rules for finding your spark.
The true ability of a leader is to be able to inspire others to do great things. And I think that's what y'all all came here.
I've been told that I have to begin my comments with swag, swag. So I had the chance to meet with some of the kids in the program today. Where are you? Scream out. There you go. I love those kids. And so what I thought I would do, because they gave me a little bit of time to say whatever I want, is offer you a little bit of some observations for your future. I have 5 little rules that you can follow as you find your spark and bring your spark to life. The first is to go after the things that you want. Let me tell you a story. So a friend of mine and I, we went for a run in Central Park. The Roadrunners organization, on the weekends, they host races. And it's very common at the end of the race, they'll have a sponsor who will give away something, apples or bagels or something. And on this particular day, when we got to the end of the run, there were some free bagels. And they had picnic tables set up, and on one side was a group of volunteers. On the table were boxes of bagels, and on the other side was a long line of runners waiting to get their free bagel. So I said to my friend, let's get a bagel. And he looked at me and said, the line's too long. And I said, free bagel. And he said, I don't want to wait in line. And I was like, free bagel. And he says, nah, it's too long. And that's when I realized that there's 2 ways to see the world. Some people see the thing that they want, and some people see the thing that prevents them from getting the thing that they want. I could only see the bagels. He could only see the line. And so I walked up to the line. I leaned in between 2 people, put my hand in the box, and pulled out 2 bagels. And no one got mad at me, because the rule is you can go after whatever you want. You just cannot deny anyone else to go after whatever they want. Now, I had to sacrifice choice. I didn't get to choose which bagel I got. I got whatever I pulled out, but I didn't have to wait in line. So the point is you don't have to wait in line. You don't have to do it the way everybody else has done it. You can do it your way. You can break the rules. You just can't get in the way of somebody else getting what they want. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2. I like this one. In the 18th century, there was something that spread across Europe and eventually made its way to America called puerperal fever, also known as the Black Death of childbed. Basically what was happening is women were giving birth and they would die within 48 hours after giving birth. This Black Death of childbirth was the ravage of Europe, and it got worse and worse and worse over the course of over a century. In some hospitals, it was as high as 70% of women who gave birth who would die as a result of giving birth. But this was the Renaissance. This was the time of empirical data and science, and we had thrown away things like tradition and mysticism. These were men of science. These were doctors. And these doctors and men of science wanted to study and try and find the reason for this Black Death of childbed, and so they got to work studying, and they would study the corpses of the women who had died. And in the morning they would conduct autopsies, and then in the afternoon they would go and deliver babies and finish their rounds. And it wasn't until somewhere in the mid-1800s that Dr. Oliver Wendell Holmes, father of Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, realized that all of these doctors who were conducting autopsies in the morning weren't washing their hands before they delivered babies in the afternoon. And he pointed it out and said, guys, you're the problem. And they ignored him and called him crazy for 30 years. Until finally somebody realized that if they simply washed their hands, it would go away. And that's exactly what happened. When they started sterilizing their instruments and washing their hands, the Black Death of childbed disappeared. My point is, the lesson here is, sometimes you're the problem. We've seen this happen all too recently with our new men of science and empirical studiers and these men of finance who are smarter than the rest of us until the thing collapsed. And they blamed everything else except themselves. And my point is take accountability for your actions. You can take all the credit in the world for the things that you do right, as long as you also take responsibility for the things you do wrong. It must be a balanced equation. You don't get it one way and not the other. You get to take credit when you also take accountability. That's lesson 2. Lesson 3, take care of each other. The United States Navy SEALs are perhaps the most elite warriors in the world. And one of the SEALs was asked, who makes it through the selection process? Who is able to become a SEAL? And his answer was, I can't tell you the kind of person that becomes a SEAL. I can't tell you the kind of person that makes it through BUDS. But I can tell you the kind of people who don't become SEALs. He says the guys that show up with huge, bulging muscles, covered in tattoos, who want to prove to the world how tough they are, none of them make it through. He said the preening leaders who like to delegate all their responsibility and never do anything themselves, none of them make it through. He said the star college athletes who've never really been tested to the core of their being, none of them make it through. He says some of the guys that make it through are skinny and scrawny. He said some of the guys that make it through, you will see them shivering out of fear. He says, however, all the guys that make it through, when they find themselves physically spent, emotionally spent, when they have nothing left to give physically or emotionally, somehow, some way, they are able to find the energy to dig down deep inside themselves, to find the energy to help the guy next to them. They become SEALs, he said. You want to be an elite warrior. It's not about how tough you are. It's not about how smart you are. It's not about how fast you are. If you want to be an elite warrior, you better get really, really good at helping the person to the left of you and helping the person to the right of you. Because that's how people advance in the world. The world is too dangerous and the world is too difficult for you to think that you can do these things alone. If you find your spark, I commend you. Now, who are you going to ask for help, and when are you going to accept help when it's offered? Learn that skill. Learn by practicing helping each other. It'll be the single most valuable thing you ever learn in your entire life. To accept help when it's offered and to ask for it when you know that you can't do it. The amazing thing is when you learn to ask for help, you'll discover that there are people all around you who've always wanted to help you. They just didn't think you needed it because you kept pretending that you had everything under control. And the minute you say, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm stuck, I'm scared, I don't think I can do this, you will find that lots of people who love you will rush in and take care of you. But that'll only happen if you learn to take care of them first. Lesson 4. Nelson Mandela is a particularly special case study in the leadership world because he is universally regarded as a great leader. You can take other personalities, and depending on the nation you go to, we have different opinions about other personalities. But Nelson Mandela, across the world, is universally regarded as a great leader. He was actually the son of a tribal chief. And he was asked one day, how did you learn to be a great leader? And he responded that he would go with his father to tribal meetings. And he remembers two things when his father would meet with other elders. One, they would always sit in a circle. And two, his father was always the last to speak. You will be told your whole life that you need to learn to listen. I would say that you need to learn to be the last to speak. I see it in boardrooms every day of the week. even people who consider themselves good leaders, who may actually be decent leaders, will walk into a room and say, here's the problem, here's what I think, but I'm interested in your opinion, let's go around the room. It's too late. The skill to hold your opinions to yourself until everyone has spoken does two things. One, it gives everybody else the feeling that they have been heard. It gives everyone else the ability to feel that they have contributed. And two, you get the benefit of hearing what everybody else has to think before you render your opinion. The skill is really to keep your opinions to yourself. If you agree with somebody, don't nod yes. If you disagree with somebody, don't nod no. Simply sit there, take it all in, and the only thing you're allowed to do is ask questions so that you can understand what they mean and why they have the opinion that they have. You must understand from where they are speaking, why they have the opinion they have, not just what they are saying. And at the end, you will get your turn. It sounds easy, it's not. Practice being the last to speak. That's what Nelson Mandela did. Number 5, Monty Python. 1, 2, 5, 3. For all the other nerds in the audience. There's one. Number 5, my favorite one of all. True story. There was a former Undersecretary of Defense who was invited to give a speech at a large conference, about 1,000 people. And he was standing on the stage with his cup of coffee and a styrofoam cup, giving his prepared remarks with his PowerPoint behind him. And he took a sip of his coffee and he smiled and he looked down at the coffee. And then he went off script. And he said, you know, last year I spoke at this exact same conference. Last year I was still the undersecretary. And when I spoke here last year, they flew me here business class. And when I arrived at the airport, there was somebody waiting for me to take me to my hotel. And they took me to my hotel and they had already checked me in and they just took me up to my room. And the next morning I came downstairs and there was someone waiting in the lobby to greet me and they drove me to this here same venue. They took me through the back entrance and took me into the green room and handed me a cup of coffee in a beautiful ceramic cup. He says, I'm no longer the undersecretary. I flew here coach. I took a taxi to my hotel and I checked myself in. When I came down the lobby this morning, I took another taxi to this venue. I came in the front door and found my way backstage, and when I asked someone, do you have any coffee? He pointed to the coffee machine in the corner, and I poured myself a cup of coffee into this here styrofoam cup. He says the lesson is, the ceramic cup was never meant for me. It was meant for the position I held. I deserve a styrofoam cup. Remember this. As you gain fame, as you gain fortune, as you gain position and seniority, people will treat you better. They will hold doors open for you. They will get you a cup of tea and coffee without you even asking. They will call you sir and ma'am, and they will give you stuff. None of that stuff is meant for you. That stuff is meant for the position you hold. It is meant for the level that you have achieved of leader or success or whatever you want to call it. But you will always deserve a styrofoam cup. Remember that. Remember that lesson of humility and gratitude. You can accept all the free stuff. You can accept all the perks. Absolutely, you can enjoy them. But just be grateful for them and know that they're not for you. I remember getting off the Acela. I took the Acela from New York to Washington, D.C. And I got off the train like everybody else. And I was walking down the platform like everyone else. And I walked past General Norty Schwartz, who used to be the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, the head of the Air Force. And here I did, you see a guy in a suit schlepping his own suitcase down the platform just like me. And just a couple months ago, he was flying on private jets and he had an entourage and other people carried his luggage. But he no longer held the position. And so now he got to drag his own suitcase. And never did it sort of remind me more that none of us deserve the perks that we get. We all deserve a styrofoam cup. It was a pleasure meeting you guys this afternoon. I was blown away by your honesty and your curiosity and your poise. And I am confident that the future is bright, despite the fact that America looks like an absolute mess right now. I am confident that the future is bright for one reason and one reason only, because you will grow up and you will be our future. Thank you very, very much, guys. You're wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. So I hope that that offered you just a little inspiration. And now let's talk about how we can have fun with an
Of
interview.
the true ability of a leader.
Okay. OSINT. Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, so I have a funny feeling that many of you in the audience are interested in information security and or maybe are a security professional already or studying to enter the field. So I'm hoping that the audience can just answer this question for me. In the chat box, feel free to type your answer. Who can tell me what the acronym OSINT stands for? There we go. Yeah, I see Brandon got it. So yeah, open source intelligence. And let's see here. Okay, so this is the first critical step with any kind of security assessment, but also for interviews. And so what we're going to do is use social engineering and we're going to do this to be able to centralize your planning for your interview. And this is going to be an attempt to change the thoughts of the person who's interviewing you. Not, you don't have to stalk them, although that is really funny. But with the right information in your hands, you can potentially gain an advantage over your competition and potentially speed up your interview process by impressing your interviewers. Okay, so okay sources of information. The data must be objective intelligence, which is free of bias, and the data must be available on public and non-public sources. So just a quick story here. Prior to an interview with a hiring manager, I took a look at his LinkedIn profile and read that he used to play baseball. And he wrote how he relates baseball to recruiting. I started off the interview by introducing myself and mentioning that I saw what he wrote on his LinkedIn profile and that I think of rock climbing in the same way as it relates to being a recruiter as he thinks of baseball. Not only did I get that job, but later when I was able to meet with the entire team, we all went out to lunch, he told all of my new colleagues that the interview was awesome and that I had him at baseball. So I came prepared, this is the point, knowing who I was speaking with, his career history, and that he liked baseball. It didn't matter that I associated it with rock climbing. The point was that he saw that I had done my homework in advance and was impressed by that. That landed me the job before I even finished interviewing. So simply using the internet as a tool, the interwebs, you can take a look at the company website, read through what they do, who they are, what their values and mission might be, any PR that might be on there that's impressive to you, and just jot some notes about things that stand out to you the most or are most meaningful to you, because these are going to be some talking points that you'll be able to use in your interview later on. And if there's anything that you read that you have questions on, you will be able to ask those questions. Rock climbing baseball tournament. That sounds awesome. So again, the published job description. I cannot emphasize the importance of thoroughly reading a job description before applying to a position. taking an interview with someone if they contact you and just before your interview. You'll learn the basics of what's expected from you, what technologies and skills rather that you must have to qualify, what areas would be the strongest for you, and what areas you might be a bit weaker with, which gives you an opportunity to study those things a little in advance. And these are all going to be talking points, for your for your interview. And also, what on the job description is appealing to you? And when someone asks that question, try not to say that your skill set's a match. It's really generic statement, and it really doesn't mean much. So other things you can look at, LinkedIn profiles. We mentioned in the previous slide, if you find a LinkedIn profile on the person that's going to be interviewing you, you can come with some common ground or an icebreaker. You'll also learn a bit about the person and what they do, what companies they've worked for, etc. And all of these things can be conversation starters and make you look impressive. And then you can go on any work-related platform. So there are news articles about the company that you could read, blog posts by the company or employees themselves, tweets. I don't know. Does anyone still use Twitter now? um, and Discord, you can use that. There are podcasts that you can watch, any published videos by the company. Talking to the people who work at the company in advance also gives you an advantage. This can give you a lot of information about working for the company, doing that particular position, and maybe you will end up with an employee referral or someone who will vouch for you in advance. So now going back to the steps, keeping track of your interviews. Now I just made a quick chart here, so you don't have to do this, but you want to do this because there's so many different kinds of interviews, interview processes, interview stages, different challenges. So I just made this to show you a few things that you could write down to keep track of your interview progress. The first interview is typically going to be with an HR professional, a technical recruiter. The amount of technical knowledge that person has is going to vary. And once you make it past that first interview, you want to make sure you know what the next steps are going to be. Is it going to be an in-person, phone, or video interview? Who's going to be interviewing you? What should you expect? What is the interview going to be like? If the HR professional or technical recruiter hasn't told you these things, ask them. They should know this information, and if not, they should be able to get that information for you so that you can feel comfortable with what that looks like. So again, keeping track of your interviews, we already talked about why it's important. So what you might want to know beforehand, who are you? Oh yeah, we already talked about this, but I just want to make sure you guys see it. So I don't need to say them again, but who are you interviewing with, etc. What kind of interview it's going to be, what style you should expect. So that could be a conversational interview where they want to get to know you and they want to learn about your thought process behind the reasons why you do things the way you do them. It could be technical rapid fire questions where they're just asking you questions as quickly as they can and you have to answer that whatever the answer is or that you don't know. If there's a technical exercise of some kind, like a coding example or coding exercise, is it live, a take-home exercise, or are they using some outside service to give you a coding exercise? And all of these things are important. Like what dependencies would you need for that exercise? So yeah. And again, the other reason why it's important to keep track of these interviews is the people who are interviewing you are tracking these things and keeping tabs on you as well. And just a couple of more recommendations here. I think using a calendar to track interviews is a good idea. Be sure to read your invitations thoroughly. And then that way also it gives you the opportunity to cancel in advance if something happens. Things come up, people understand that. I like to create a document or just use a notebook to bring along with me, having it sitting by me when I interview. I like to take notes and I have my talking points written out. I like to come prepared with those major talking points written out in advance. And I've already read the website, the job description, the company values, the LinkedIn profile of who it is that I am seeing or speaking to, what the company does, but what don't I know? So I also come prepared knowing that I'm going to write some questions out about the company and the position that I want to know, but also I expect to go to an interview and I expect to learn something. Um, so with your notes, it's best to also just leave room for each question that you do write down that you want answered in advance. Um, and yeah, so write down all your major talking points in advance, all of the things that from the job description, the company, all the things that impress you and make you want that job. Write down all of the questions that you want answered about the company or position. Notice I said want. And doing this means that you aren't going to forget the simple things to be prepared. If it's an in-person interview, I like to shake the hands of every person that I meet when I first introduce myself. And if it's a video interview, I try to look somewhat professional depending on the company. If you're worried about that, you can always ask the recruiter or HR professional in advance. Many places are very casual now and wouldn't expect you to dress up. And last, I do like to try to practice my talking points. I browse through them and read through them as much as I can in advance and make sure I've taken all those notes. And I don't read it like it's a script, but I do keep it right by my side so that I make sure that I am getting the questions answered that I want to know and that I am telling the interviewer what they want, what I want them to know about me. Um, so, oh, okay. Now we're kind of at the last section here. I left some time, I think, for some questions from the audience. I hope that this presentation helped you to feel better prepared and ready for interviews, or at the very least gives you a place to start. All interviews, whether you land the job or not, are learning experiences. So just pay close attention to what you hear, ask for feedback. Some people say not to do that immediately after an interview. I personally will give feedback to people if they ask me, but some people are not comfortable with that. And now is your chance to ask any questions. I've got a few minutes here and I will try to answer them. And if not, then we can go ahead and call it a night. So bring it on, guys. Okay. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm thinking that maybe no one has any. So if that's the case, I just want to thank you guys again for coming out. How long is an interview? That would depend on the interview. So I would ask the interviewer or the recruiter or whoever it is that you've been in contact with. I would ask them about how long to expect an interview to be. And give yourself an additional 15 minutes with that because you may have some questions that they didn't expect you to ask. and that may end up taking a little bit more time. Is that the only question? Does it make sense for you to ask for feedback? Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. So does it make sense to ask for feedback when you got rejected before an interview so that, okay, yeah, it does if you wanted to. That's going to be tricky because sometimes those rejection emails come from a place where you cannot get a response back. So I guess it depends on whether or not you have if you have the person's email address or contact information to ask them directly. But I try to let people know if there's a reason specifically why I had to reject them, especially if they're qualified. And what is something okay. All right, hold on, I don't want to skip any questions. Is the cover letter necessary with a CV? Okay, so I would say no, a cover letter is not necessary. It's becoming kind of an outdated practice. However, there are hiring managers that will be looking for them because they want to see that you went above and beyond. So it doesn't hurt to take the extra 2 minutes to write up a cover letter. There are plenty of formats online that'll tell you exactly how to do that. But and for particular positions, they are going to want to know that. And the next question here is, what is something that stands out in an interview process? I was thinking of starting a YouTube channel or blog sometime soon. Yeah, I mean, all of those things could definitely make you stand out, but what is most meaningful to me is what you can communicate to me and to the other people who'll be interviewing you during the interview process. So that's where I was kind of getting at with coming prepared, showing that you did your homework, you know what company you're talking to, you know that this is the job you want, or at least you think you do. And until you know for sure, you're asking lots of questions. I've actually been told by different people that they felt like I was interviewing them as the interviewee, and that's because I was. And it's important to do that. I hope that helps. But as far as if we're talking about what to put on your resume before an interview, that's a different topic that we already covered. Any other questions? You're welcome. You're welcome, Brandoon. And if you guys want to reach out to me at any time, like I said, I'm Lamy Climber on our OffSec Discord channel. And also you can find me on LinkedIn, just Amy K, Senior Technical Recruiter at OffSec. I'm going to call it a night. I hope you all had a good time. And thank you so much for joining.